When the next appointment came up, we had tried calling David to ask about his mother's status, but he never answered or returned our calls. True EMS horror story. I worked as a dispatcher for a pretty small ambulance station near a fairly large city in the middle of the US. I don't know how specific I can be since this is a true story, and I'm going to tell one of the scariest stories I have to this job. We had a patient who we will call Susan. She was a dialysis patient, and one of the services we offered was to take very unwell and disabled patients to and from these dialysis appointments. She lived with her son, who we will call David. He was in his late 40s and his mother, Susan, in her late 70s or so. Every week, like clockwork, we would have a unit bring Susan to and from her dialysis treatments 3 times a week. Everyone knew her at the station because we had been doing this for quite some time for Susan. We were all familiar with her and her son, whether it was a crew seeing her in person and taking care of her, or speaking to her or her son on the phone frequently about the appointments as I had done. Now is where things took a bit of a turn. When the next appointment came up, we had tried calling David to ask about his mother's status, but he never answered or returned our calls. So, being that we had a contract with Susan and we were to take her to these appointments unless told otherwise, we sent a crew to collect her for treatment. When the crew arrived at the scene, they knocked on the door to no response. They knocked again and were greeted by David smoking a cigarette. David seemed surprised. The crew said they were to pick up Susan for her appointment. David responded stating he had forgotten to call, but Susan was still in the hospital not doing well. The crew gave their best wishes and David shut the door. But the crew felt like something was off. They immediately radioed the dispatch that something was wrong and they requested we call the hospital David said she was at to see if she was still there. The hospital had no record of her being there since we last knew. So we had the crew leave the scene and we called for a welfare check on Susan at her son's home. We heard nothing the rest of the day from the police, David, Susan, or anyone involved. The next morning I came into work and the very first call I took began with, "This is Sheriff blank with blank. I'm calling to report back on the welfare check you asked us to perform yesterday." I was nervous as he sounded concerned and I didn't really expect them to call us back with any news. He proceeded to let me know that upon arrival to the home, they spoke with David, who was adamant his mother didn't feel well, but that she was home from the hospital. The police asked to just check on Susan to make sure she was all right, and eventually David obliged, letting the police in. Once entering the home, they were met with a grim scene, though I imagine they smelled it first. They continued to explain that what the officers observed was the dead body of Susan propped up on the couch wrapped in blankets, as if she was watching the television, but she had been dead for a while. They approximated around 2 weeks.